Boys and girls, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I've promised you from the TikTok page that I was going to take on this absolute proof video here and kind of break it down and review it and tell you what I thought. I know some of you that are on my page, you appreciate my efforts anyways to take on things that are claims, to take on stuff like some of these things about Joe Biden or some of these things about the White House and reflections, and go through and actually do some searching and try to find as best hardcore proof as I can to prove or disprove or do whatever, just to come out with the truth and say, here's what happened. Here's how I know what happened. And it's not a 1 minute TikTok video of arrows doing this all over the place and it's zooming in and out like this. And I'm like, look, that's not his ear. So when I saw this video come out, I was like, I know what's going to happen with this. There's going to be a whole bunch of people that will immediately, this is 100% truth. There's no question. Look, a video, it's true. Then there's going to be people who are just going to run out there and be like, this is 100% false. All this has been debunked, because here is an article from a liberal that says it was debunked. And they said, nuh-uh. So therefore, ergo, whatever. And I don't like either of those. All right. And like I said, I think I've probably been hitting pretty hard at I call it the conservative side of the house. I don't know people's actual political leaning. Part of believing something, part of this whole fact checking requires an element of faith. All right. And I'm not going to go into it like from a biblical perspective so much as I'm going to take it from a place that almost everyone can relate to. That's our legal perspective. All right, so our legal perspective in the United States, court of law. Well, let's just start from the get-go. And you're like, what's your experience in this? Well, it even qualifies you to talk about anything to do with investigation, courts, testimony, proof, trials. I spent 18 and a half years in law enforcement. I was in various roles as far as titles, but throughout all of it, I was doing things to investigate. I've got experience teaching adults, reconstructing collisions that happened and I wasn't there, and trying to figure out the best of what happens. When you're reconstructing a collision, you, again, aren't saying this is 100% what happened. What you're saying is this is what most likely, all the evidence is pointing to, most likely would have had to have happened for everything to end up in this wreck. All right, because there's principles involved such as physics. And so again, you go into the mathematical principles, the fact that, if items are going to follow the laws of nature, and you've got to utilize all that stuff to help put together a picture. And in our courts of law, okay, they recognize probable cause. This is what an officer needs to make an arrest decision. And I had to do a whole series on this anyways, because of all the questions about he shouldn't have even been arresting that guy or that girl, and kind of what goes into that. But anyways, probable cause, equivocate that to like 51% assuredness. It is probable that this person did this. It's probable. That's not enough to convict. All right. And so again, that's why a lot of people get really antsy when you see someone getting arrested and you're like, I don't think they did it. No one gives a shit. All right. That's not part of the process. It's you're going out, and with what evidence is available and what factors are available, you're making a decision that a reasonable, intelligible person would say it's probable this person did what's being alleged. We're not convicting on the roadside. I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care. All right. I am an investigator. I'm an enforcement officer. So I just go out, and if I see the crime and I have reason to believe that this is what's happened, that you've done this, I'm obligated, within levels of discernment, but I'm obligated to take a position on that and make an action. I said, but I'm not the trial judge. All right, I'm not the jury. I said, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to present the evidence, tell the truth. I'm like, if you want to tell your side of it, you'll have the opportunity. If you want to sit there in silence, that's completely right. You can have a trial by a judge, you can have a trial by a jury, whatever you want. So for conviction, if they don't go in and plead guilty, for conviction, you have to have what we call beyond a reasonable doubt, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that is not 100%. I equivocate that somewhere in like 90 to 95% assuredness. So again, you're convincing a judge or a jury or both. There's a lot of things here that's pointing the finger at that guy or that girl. I have this one little doubt, but I mean, that's a big what if. The defense attorney keeps what ifing everything to death, but I mean, it's like if a comet, broke into the atmosphere and the guy saw the glint and that's why he swore. I mean, it was like this really random stuff. So that's not a reasonable doubt. So again, it's what is a reasonable doubt, and dismissing that stuff. Now that's for criminal court. For civil court, you only need like a preponderance of evidence. All right. So if you remember all the way back in the O.J. Simpson trial, you had the criminal court proceedings, and he was found not guilty. And so they took him to civil court, and he was found civilly culpable for that. And you're like, well, how does that happen? One court finds him not guilty, but then suddenly he's paying millions of dollars to Nicole's family. And it was because civilly, you don't have to meet the burden of proof that criminal court has to meet. And that burden of proof, that's another thing too. The people making the claims, we had the burden of proof on us to prove that person guilty. They didn't have to defend themselves. Now, if you're laying down the smack in court, someone's over there, they said they didn't do it, but they don't want to talk. That was their right. But in the back of my mind, I was always like, man, if you accused me or arresting you for rape, I'd be like, the hell you say? What? What? I'd be, what are you talking about? It's never happened. Not even close. And they decide, say, well, a few things that you can do to help yourself. Because we had enough probable cause based on X, Y, and Z, whatever, the statements of the victim, etc. We got a lot of DNA from the scene. We just don't have your DNA. And I'd be like, I will spit, piss, jack off, poop. What do you need? Bleed? What do you need from me? I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. What day of the week it is, let me find who, it was probably on a stream or on a TikTok or with my wife or kids sitting around or I've probably been right here, whatever time of day you're claiming this happened. So let's go. How can I help you help me? Because I ain't got nothing to do with what you're claiming. All right. So, I mean, that's the type of thing is, as much as you have the right as the defendant to not say anything, if you're not guilty, why not allow scrutiny? This whole election fraud thing, I've said this in videos before. I've believed it was true. I'm not saying this video. I'm just talking about the fact that the election was rigged or stolen or frauded in some way, shape, or form. I actually saw this stuff with my own two eyes. But I was watching the election results on the night of November 3rd. But I remember us watching this stuff, and we played pretty late. And we were watching this, and I'm like, why is everything stalled? What is going on? So between all of us, we've seen a bunch of elections. We've seen returns. We've seen a lot of other things. And nothing was making sense. What's with all this stuff like in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court was basically saying, F the law of the state and the Constitution. We're just going to go ahead and let people have ballots showing up as many as 3 days late. Funny thing about Pennsylvania, I have a buddy in Pennsylvania. I remember probably 2 months before the election, he told me they changed our polling manager out to some idiot that doesn't know what they're doing just because, this woman that was actually in charge, she had a really good plan for how to do COVID-related voting, and it was all going to be done and they fired her just outright and hired someone else who's not had anything to do with it before. They don't know their ass from the hole ground. And then he tells me a week later, he goes, I got 2 ballots, one for my wife and one for me that they mailed to us. We didn't request, we vote in person. He said, but they mailed us 2 ballots for us. He goes, but then they mailed us 2 ballots for someone else. I don't know if these people live there at some point. I've never heard of them. He says, but they mailed us 2 other ballots. And it was I think 2 or 3 more weeks later, he goes, I got 2 more ballots. So he said he had a total of 6 ballots at his house. He goes, and honestly, with If I was unscrupulous and I didn't care, he goes, I could have used all 6 to vote. And he says, I didn't, but I said, he goes, I could have. And I said, yeah, because I think, didn't Pennsylvania, they basically said they're not doing signature matching? He goes, yeah, I could have written Donald Duck's name on there. They wouldn't have cared. And so, again, there was little things like this leading up. I was concerned, too. A lot of people want to go into this thing of Donald Trump was the one who was telling us you need to be concerned. And if Trump said it, you guys were everyone, Trump, Trump, Trump. I barely ever heard what the dude said. I don't watch the news because I hate the news. Fox News, too. I don't have OAN. I don't even have, like, cable, anything. I don't ever see statements from it. So, hi, did you see what Trump said? And I was like, no. I check Twitter every now and then. But honestly, I mean, I don't take marching orders from anyone other than what's in here and the information, knowledge, and standards that my parents helped instill in me. Because I have enough common sense to be able to see things. What we're going to talk about on here, I was, as I watched this video, taking notes, I was thinking to myself, what's the best way to approach this? Like I said, what's the best way to eat an elephant? And I don't think it's me going through line by line and trying to verify stuff. And you're like, oh, it's because no, it's because I don't have access to like 90% of what they're saying. All right. I mean, I can't go back and verify this stuff. When they talk about IP addresses and all in there, I have no idea where that stuff came from. I mean, they say an expert collated the data and got it from somewhere, but they don't show sources on a lot of this. And I will say that's one weakness of this, but it's not a weakness that invalidates it. I was actually worried about this. I hope they show some sources. But as they went through and started talking, I was like, okay, I kind of get this now, that this doesn't need to be 100% sourced out every word. Most of the things that work to debunk this stuff are shit sourced anyways. They're garbage. And that's one other thing that I actually kind of decided to take as an approach on this, is that I don't need to debunk or confirm everything, because the stuff that people are claiming as debunks are not. And they haven't debunked everything. There's an article somewhere I saw, and a lot of you know this, a lot of the folks on here that follow me, you guys already know Google stuff, and it always gives you like the lean from the left. You can't hardly find, like, if you know an article exists and you type it in and you're trying to even type that direct thing, it will try and give you the, here's what we believe you should believe. And maybe you can find it on page 4, but now, or you just DuckDuckGo it and you can find it right away. I started going, and someone brought up a good point. One of the naysayers that's going to my channel, and you're fine. I appreciate everybody. They said, this has all been fact checked. Really? Show me. And he sent me a link. And it wasn't a proof of it all being fact checked. When I opened it up, I laughed because I was like, I've seen this one before. And number one, it doesn't disprove everything or anything, really. Number two, though, even if it does, let's just say all those fact checks are right, it doesn't touch on every part of the stuff that they're bringing. And I started thinking of this. I said, 50% of this video is true. He says in here, Mike Lindell, bless his heart, not everybody's a born speaker. And I'm not saying I still am, but I can kind of flow a lot better than I used to. Because, again, I taught professionally to adults for 7 years. But that's the thing, is that you can tell he has his affectations. You can tell that they were doing the best they could. It's not this isn't a 60 minutes interview type thing where they went through. It's a man, but somebody said, I wish it was more official. And I said, it's a man spending money out of his own pocket, basically, probably a couple people, maybe some funding. I don't know. All right, but that doesn't invalidate anything. Just because someone said, well, he was a crackhead, I got super pissed about that. Some of you might have seen my reply to that comment. I think I called that person a piece of trash or a puzzle-toothed product of incest, because I was really, that pisses me off to no end. Who are you to ask about somebody else's background and judge the rest of their lives based on that? And this is what they do with politicians. They're like, isn't it true that you smoked weed in 1974? Bill Clinton, I didn't inhale. I mean, Bill Clinton has way worse problems than maybe smoking weed at some point in his life. That was the thing, though. I mean, there's so many other issues, and if somebody is repentant and has turned from that, and that's literally the Mike Lindell story, is that he's got a book on it, how he turned his life away from drug abuse and alcohol abuse to God and sobriety and everything, and that's a victory story. And someone's gonna say, "What'd you do in college? What'd you do what'd you do yesterday?" I'm not the one on TV. Well, yeah, when the spotlight turns to you, you start running and hiding like a bunch of cockroaches. So that's my thing, is that his past, nothing to do with it. And that's what they try to do, these people. That's a liberal mentality, is if you can't beat somebody on the merits of the argument, you try and beat them through subverting their past. Now, I'm not saying that's 100% illegitimate. If you've got someone who is a proven liar, like in court, you can't let them come back in court and speak. So I get that you do integrity checks, but you can't just say, oh, he smoked crack back in the 80s and early 90s, and now he's forever tainted. 20 some years after he's last rock, he is invalid on something like this, which has a litany of items in it. We're going to start getting into the video. I am not going to show parts of the video like rolling, and some of you get really antsy about that because you don't like still screens, but I have to kind of do it that way because this video Absolute Proof has been banned from YouTube and probably some of TikTok by their fact checker committee. So, because it doesn't line up with supposed fact checks or whatever. I don't know. I didn't remember that there used to be a thing that you weren't allowed to put BS on the internet. There's nothing in any part of this that promotes violence or insurrection or anything literally, it's like the nicest man on earth who made pillows is speaking from his heart, and they're talking about very realistic evidence. All right, so the first part of this video, I decided to just break it down into different parts. Basically, he starts off the video, and I really encourage you to watch this, even if you're a naysayer and you don't like any of this. I really encourage you to watch this video. It's at michaeljlindell.com. The very beginning, he talks about two miracles. He basically, and if I understood him correctly, he talks about the fact that Trump was winning so bigly. He was winning by so many votes and destroying in states that they said, Ohio, that's going to be on a Tito. No, he was crushing. He was crushing everything. And that's why you saw all that stoppage all of a sudden. It was like when they were announcing, because these people look like you had just run over their grandmama's grave. All right, they were like so downtrodden, and they knew it was like there was no hope left. And then suddenly everything just stopped. And then you had like the biggest counties that are well-known havens of liberalism. Wayne County, which is the Detroit area. Detroit, which I don't know if you're familiar, hasn't really fared well under liberal control for the past 40 to 60 years. You have Fulton County down in Georgia. That's the Atlanta area. And again, you have a very strong presence, liberal ideologies in those areas, and a couple other places as well throughout the country. Philadelphia, okay? And you just suddenly saw like this freeze, and nobody was all of a sudden, no counting was going on, and just like, what is happening? Really bizarre stuff. And so he says, he was winning so big that it caused that massive fraud having to take place. Otherwise, it could have just nickeled and dimed it here and there, and we would have never seen it. But because it was so big, and they had to basically turn the election upside down in all these major states that everybody's watching, they basically had to freeze it so you'd go to bed and then inject it in the middle of the night when no one's watching, and then come back in the morning, and suddenly everything's changed, and it had to be considerable amount. This has a lot to do with some of the fact checking, because I heard over and over and over, if I heard it once, I heard it a bunch of times, everything was fact checked. None of this stuff is true. In fact, the one fact check that came out, the lazy fact check here for Mike Lindell's video. It was lead stories came out, and they said Mike Lindell's a promising exposed election fraud relies on false and unsubstantiated claims, period. And it just says these are all debunked, basically. So I've never looked at any of these debunks that much in depth because I know what it's like. I don't know if y'all remember when Snopes was a big deal, because Snopes' big thing, if you remember how they started, Snopes started off with a boy died at Disney World and the Carousel of Progress. There's a midget hangs himself in the background of Wizard of Oz as they're going down the yellow brick road, and you see someone hanging. False. That was like a crane opening its wings, but it kind of, if you just looked real carefully, because it's a silhouette. So that's what they were known for, and they got a big reputation of, if you needed to know some weird little thing you heard on the internet, you could go to Snopes and find it out. Well, then they got big into the political side of things, but you could always tell that there was always some snidey little way of putting it that was always like favoring liberals. And a lot of the times the debunks were opinions of how to interpret something, and that's really bad. That is really bad for a fact-checking organization. But the problem is that now Snopes, factcheck.org, lead stories, muckruck or whatever, I don't know, all of them, PolitiFact, they've all got these reputations. And of course, if you go look up, where do you go to find if somebody's reputable? Somewhere on the internet. And how reputable is that company? Who knows? I mean, this is, it's the, you never know what's actually going on. So I actually started looking up some different fact check companies, and I started checking their reputation. Of course, they're saying, oh, PolitiFact, just spot on. Lead stories, spot on. All right. And so I tried to find a few things that were easily debunked. First thing I do when I go to a PolitiFact or any of those other places is I look up their staff. Now, I'm not doxing them or anything like that. I'm not a doofus. All right, but I go and look up their staff, and I look at what college they went to, and I look at what sort of career they've had. And I don't know if that's exactly. Some people might not think that's fair, or that it is 100% the best way of doing things. But your pedigree, that's what kind of forms and makes you. And again, if we're going to accuse one side of being biased or cultish, then we probably should do both, because as much as there are people that claim there's a cult for Trump, which I actually had a person come in my chat and go, cult of 45 never ending. And I was like, oh, you're in the wrong spot, lady. So that's the thing, though, is I always go look and see what the background is on the people, because I'm always like, sure, you're being unbiased and completely open in this, and you're just looking for fact. And because I've had the same accusations made to me, I won't call it if I can't put all of the evidence out there as best I can. All right, so this is one of them. This is one of PolitiFact, and the reason I'm showing this is I want to show you what kind of things here. It says, video shows Biden saying salute the Marines after hearing the words in an earpiece before his inauguration. So there's this out here, and as some of you get this, remember the video, and he's walking somewhere. I don't know if you haven't heard it, you can go look it up. I'm not playing it, but basically they have these little briefs that says, if your time is short, Joe Biden was heard saying something like he walked through the U.S. Capitol doors being held by a pair of U.S. Marines. It's not clear what he said. I want to highlight that. It's not clear what he said. Some reporters, Keith Olbermann being one of them. Now, if you don't know who Keith Olbermann is, then you need to go look him up and his history of being a complete in the bed. He is the far leftist person you could find on the planet. I don't believe a word he would say, but I don't know. Because he says good-looking Marines. That's what some of them said. Some social media users claim he said salute the Marines. They said the comment proved it was him repeating stuff through an earpiece. The video itself does not substantiate that claim. So that's their brief on how this was proven 100% false. Now, I watched this video and I attempted to do my own fact check on it. And I honestly think he says good-looking Marines. I can't tell 100%. I listened to it. I listened to it because it also could be mistaken as I'm saying salute the Marines. But as I kept hearing it, I could almost hear that K sound in there. I'm not trying to like disprove that. As far as like, oh, it's bullcrap and I want to disprove it. I really want to know what he was saying. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw this video, the first time I saw it, and I wasn't even thinking about it, I actually was like, okay, I think he said salute the Marines, but I think this was days before the inauguration, and they had been talking about how they'd been doing dress rehearsal. And I honestly thought if he said salute the Marines, it was probably him like repeating a cue or like kind of going, you know how you'd go through, you're like, okay, we're dress rehearsal, so when I get out there, okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to open up my icebreakers and then I'm going to put one in my mouth and then I'm going to go over here. Like if you're going to rehearse something before you rehearse your TikTok videos. Usually those aren't just first try videos. I've seen some of them, there's like, this is my 28th try. Or the amazing no-look shots, basketball shots, or, you know, darts through a spinning fan blade or something. They've done 100 takes of that before. So I actually thought he said that, but it wasn't because he was mentally deficient in that one moment. It was probably because he was rehearsing. And then as I saw this other thing about good looking Marines, I said, could he have said that? And I went through several times. And like I said, I closed my eyes. I tried not to think about it. I tried to act like first time hearing it. And I think he says it, but again, it's not clear. All right. But if I were to fact check this video, if someone had said, can you fact check this? I would have come down here and basically said, I think he might have said good looking Marines. If he said the other thing, I don't believe it would have been for that because it looked like a dress rehearsal, but I don't really know for sure. So this one, it goes either way. I'd have that meter straight up and down, but they call this 100% false. And they do this over and over and over and over again. A lot of the stuff that is fact checked against these voting numbers there's no substantiated proof of this. They're not saying it doesn't exist, and they're not saying that they've seen proof in the alternative. They're saying someone hasn't shown. Now remember, I talked about burden of proof. If Mike Lindell and anyone in our nation is going to claim that there are 660,892 margin of error votes, they need to provide evidence of such. And it doesn't have to be someone standing there going, I was able to go back in time and be a fly on the wall, and I watched this exact thing. I watched people who walked in and they said, hi, I'm an illegal alien and I'd like to vote. I'm not talking about evidence like that, but what I'm talking about is they need to show how that comes about, how that information came about, what your source is. Was it someone in the voting location? Now, a lot of people have been too scared to speak up and have their names out. A lot of people did sign affidavits, and there's a lot of people who have put their names in there. There's a lot of people who have put their reputations at risk, for sure, and their livelihoods at risk, potentially, like their ability to get a job somewhere, potentially. A lot of these people have been silenced on social media. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is going on that in that direction for some of these folks that have spoken up. But I think there's a lot more out there who are probably like, I have seen nothing, you know, I know nothing. Or they told someone in silence and they're like, do you not call my name up because I don't want the press and 4 million liberals banging down my door trying to kill me. That's the thing in here. But here's what's funny too, is that when they say all this stuff's been debunked, it's all been debunked. I was able to find like one or two debunkings, which again were more the county's election official says, nuh-uh. And that's the debunk. And I'm like, could they lie to you? Could they have been paid? Or could they just be like, things went our way, you know? Because here's the deal. 10,000 votes-ish is the margin of victory. You have 660,000 being called into question. And it wouldn't take but one of these things getting booted. The illegal aliens voting. Now, here's what's funny is that one specifically, I remember, that's why I pulled up to this. I tried to go to Maricopa County's site and find something. I couldn't hardly find anything that would help me figure out where these numbers came from. But I searched 36,000 illegal aliens voting, or illegal aliens voting in Arizona, period. And there's no debunks on it. I can't even find that showing up. Now, everything else, the debunks are the first things because, again, Google pushing the narrative, pushing their, it's a debunk. I couldn't find debunks on like half this stuff. They're not even mentioned. And I'm like, let's say, and then so that's point one, is not all of this has been debunked. Point two, or if it has, I can't find it. If you want to find the debunks on these, send them to me. I hope they're more than someone goes, nope, and that's your debunk, because it's pretty thin. All right. But the other thing is that if that's true and the rest of these numbers are shite, let's just get rid of all but 36,000 votes, Trump still wins. And that's what's kind of killed me through this whole thing. I know there's a lot more stuff that is going on in here, and so I'm going to try and find, like I said, I'm not going to play the video. I don't want to get in trouble. He does something here with Michigan. I think he talks about later. Nevada, same thing. 34,000 margin of victory. And again, I couldn't find anything about I couldn't find anything for or against illegal aliens voting in the election. All right, but I mean, let's just say that's true. That's 4,000 there. But then they started talking about these mail-in or absentee ballots from voters who are known to have voted in other states. That's a pretty heavy accusation. You don't just pull that out of your ass. And see, this is the other thing too. Common sense plays a lot in this, and you're like, oh, you're using your biased common sense. You're biasing it for them. See, my common sense says none of this would have happened. You know, the thing about the truth and is that, number one, you can lay it out on the table 100%, just like throw it all out there, and you don't have to hide any part of it, and you don't have to like recreate any part of it to like make it more truth. And this has been pretty consistent. I mean, because there was some stuff that I've seen some of these things before. Like I said, I mean, I haven't followed it 100%. Like I don't eat, sleep, drink, and breathe all of this stuff. I honestly didn't even know that this stuff was still coming out after it was all said and done. But this stuff right here, this is pretty darn convincing, because this is actual information. People are putting their names behind this. Again, I don't know where all the sources are, but I don't think these numbers, especially some of them, are so specific. I don't think they just pulled them out of their ass. I really don't. Now, again, I could be wrong on that, but it's not a question of 100% proof. Even though he says the word 100% proof, he's wrong in his video. It's not 100% proof, but definitely enough, I think, to tip the scales, or to the point that they should look into it so they can put it to bed if it's not. And this is what Ted Cruz, I've said this a couple times in comments on my page, and people get, again, some of you are so hateful about people because of their belief system, whether it be towards Democrats or against Democrats, or towards Republicans or against, or conservative, whatever you want to call it. I've seen some really trashy things. All right. But some of you are so angry and hateful against other people that you just, you hear it and you close it down. And I mean, granted, I understand if you don't like something, obviously you don't need to envelop yourself in it, but on the other hand, I mean, some of you got to wake up. Some of you've got to sit there and say, I mean, did they just fabricate all this? You know, what makes the most sense? Somebody coming in with exact numbers and demanding to get their day in court. You know how much, again, reputation and money and even criminal intent some of these things could be with accusations against someone. I mean, that's kind of why when victims claim stuff, their statements tend to be weighed a little bit more as evidence, because their claims of X, Y, and Z, they risk jail time. Now, I'm not saying these people do, although there's a part in here where Michigan attorney and the Michigan attorney general, they are threatened with jail time. It's insane. You can go find that stuff. You don't need this video to find that. All right. So he's, I'm just like, all right, if this is all bullshit, why hasn't anyone been cooperative in letting it just play out and say, come on in? Like I said, Ted Cruz, all he was asking for on the floor on January 6th, sorry, was give us 10 days to audit all this stuff and go through all these claims. And if we come up and it's nonsense, we will roll the red carpet out for Biden ourselves because he will be the just electorate. If it's trash, we have time to figure out what's going on and fix this. Suddenly, people decide to act stupid and riot. A couple thousand, 1 or 2,000 or something out of 250,000 people that were there. Not at all caused by Trump. By the way, that's another thing that these factual people push is that Trump said, let's storm the Capitol, and then he marches off and does that. If you read the full I literally was like, nah. And I went and read the full text of his speech. Oh, it's a long speech, and you got to read the whole thing. He doesn't ever do that. He doesn't ever do that. He talks about fighting in the sense of like what Mike Lindell's fighting for, but he never once mentions. In fact, I think there's a point there. He says, let's walk up there to the Capitol and peacefully let them know that we support the Republicans to do the right thing. I mean, that's legitimately like almost a quote. And that's the most he said. And they saying that incited violence. This is how shite this country's media has become, that they all just peddle bullshit and they hope that you don't take the time to go find out. This right here, though, I think this is a bomb that's blowing up right now in slow motion, and they're going to have a hard time just saying nuh-uh to this. But again, though, we go through Nevada, Pennsylvania, so he does mention Pennsylvania. Now, this mail-in votes counted without a Republican observer, which I think is against the law. That's like 680,000. Only 10. If they cut 10% of those out, that's a win. All right. The mail-in ballots that are that they weren't even supposed to have, I think. I don't know. That was 68,000. Something. See, there's a detailed table below it. I don't see a detailed table. So again, some of this stuff I was a little bit like, okay, where's that come from? There's a couple in here, crazy different things I don't really understand, or I don't know where I've never heard of them before. This one right here, though, from Georgia, this is a big point of contention because Georgia, remember the call from the Secretary of State. And of course, the Secretary of State, who's a cheeseball, claimed it was Trump trying, and the story of the media. He's trying to give me some votes. Give me some votes. That's not how that call went. Georgia Secretary of State got a call from Trump, and it was this list basically in Trump's hand going, look, we have people who voted in Georgia, voted in another state. That's 395 there. Unregistered voters who voted, that's 2,400. So where are we, like 2,800 now-ish, 2,900. Another 100. So let's just say 3,000 now. Voters who registered too late in the election, that's $3,000. People who died prior to the election got counted, supposedly 10,000 just in that. He's like, just give me the dead people's ballots. Or just toss those out. We win. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying, God, slide me a couple of those ballots. No, he was saying underage children registered to vote and illegally voted. There's 66,000. Just give me those. Or don't give them to me. Don't flip them to me. Just take them away. Because, take those out of the picture. Take the felons with incomplete sentences. That is against the law in Georgia. If you have an incomplete sentence, all right. Now it says if you still owe money, that's okay. But if you have time or you're on probation or something, no, I think probation, but they're like basically you have time. So I don't know I'm assuming they would have checked that before they made that claim, but again, there's no resources, there's no real explanation behind these. So, that again, that's the thing that bothered me the most. I kind of wanted to hear where the resources were, and he does allude to it. Now, he doesn't completely just say these numbers and he's pulling them back out of his rear end or anything. So I don't know. Like I said, were there corrections on this? But look at this: 1.5 million votes for 10,000. Again, let us go. These they did hand counts. If 66, I don't know, I'm just picking a number out here at random because I don't know which one. Ballots with no chain of custody, 600,000 should have been out the window. So let's just say if that's true, or that's what their contention is, oh, well, you got 600,000 ballots that shouldn't have been done. They're like, oh, well, let us recount them. They're recounting this. I mean, if I owe you $10 and I give you 5 ones U.S. currency and I give you 5 ones Monopoly money, and you go, that's not $10. And I say, well, here, let me 1, 2, 3, 10. And hand it right back to you and say, that's $10. That's no good. What are you talking about? So again, though, let's get the pen or whatever that marks the bills to confirm they're real. And then we can go back to the table and say, you're right, you were giving me $10. Why are we trying to hide or being obstructive of getting his stuff in? It's crazy. It's absolutely nutty. So this is just in the miracle parts of these. He says that's part of the second miracle is, all this stuff is going on, and his big contention there. That's what Ted Cruz's big thing was. Let us go and audit this stuff or do due diligence, and then put it to bed. Because I know you and me, well, some of you, all right, but I think the vast majority of the country, definitely more than what you see now, would be satisfied if we had gotten at least a second review of these things that was from a body of folks who were like, let's just check it out, see what's going on, give us 10 days, then we'll vote again, or we'll come back with our results. And everyone would have been like, that's something. Give it to us. And some of us still, well, I don't know, but at least it would have been, And again, you accuse me of something and I have nothing to hide. I'll be like, what votes do you need there, hun? Here, you need all this? Is this? Let me give you this. Well, I didn't ask for that. Well, no, you go ahead and take my computer. You take my phone if you need it. I got nothing on there to hide. Go ahead. You need a bottle of water while you're doing it? Can I help you in any way? Or you want me to stay out of the way? Do you need anything else? Not this whole obstruction thing. I would ask the courts to hear the cases. Listen, folks, these cases were not looked at by the courts and dismissed because there was no merit to the stuff being presented. Of the cases that were actually heard, I actually saw this stat today, of the cases that actually made it into court. So there are all these cases brought. A lot of them did get booted for lack of standing. All right, so it'd be like if I sued Pennsylvania or something. They'd be like, how are you affected negatively by this? Well, it's my president. They're like, yeah, but you're not a Pennsylvania resident, so tossing that case. That's not because there's no evidence. That's just lack of standing. Some of the other ones were technicalities, like they wanted to change something on the brief and somebody said no. I mean, it was just lots of stuff like that. But of the ones that went to court, it was like 75% of them actually were winning cases. And it's a very small percentage. I think it is only like 21 cases actually went to court. We still have cases pending. The Supreme Court's fixing to hear them now. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but here they go. So again, evidence. If I say this right here is evidence of a crime you committed, and I make the arrest, and I make the allegation, and I send the document up to court, and the court says, oh yeah, you don't have jurisdiction for this court. That doesn't mean that my allegations are false. It doesn't mean that this isn't really evidence, and it doesn't mean you're not guilty. All right? It could be that maybe I can't find the court. Maybe you don't ever get tried and you're not found guilty. But that doesn't invalidate all of the stuff on my end. And so again, as the states, I would be like, please, because we want you to put this all to bed so that when Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party come back 2 years, next year, 2 years, 4 years, vote, we don't want to hear this shit again. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. If this doesn't get squared away, if this doesn't get some traction and some stuff at least looked at, I don't know what the next step is. I honestly don't. But if they just kind of keep sweeping this, are you going to trust the next time you go to the polls? Someone said Donald Trump should run again 2024. I was like, why? He would not have a chance in hell. Because if this is allowed to stand, no one that they don't want to be elected will ever be elected. If you're talking about federal races, good luck on that. Before we move into that, I wanted to point out that, like I said, he says in here, this is 100% proof. It's not, because, and I say it's not 100% proof because it's kind of, I get why they didn't maybe give up all the cards. And this actually does come up in one of these interviews. They talk about they are evaluating 2 other counties. This one group that found all tons of fraud and all tons of craziness, they said they're evaluating 2 other counties. They won't tell us who they are. And the reason is because if they tell, people can start damage control and smoke screening. And I'm good with that. All right, so maybe that's why they're not giving up all the resources. Or it could be that they don't have the resource for it. I don't know. Like I said, so really, as far as those numbers are concerned, I think they're real for the most part. You got to ask yourself this other question too. Why are they canceling dissenters? Now, I know what reason was given for Trump. I know the reason they gave. I'm not saying that's a good reason. I know the reason they gave for Trump was it was causing insurrection and rioting, which was bullshit. We all know that. But, in fact, the tweet or the video message he sent out saying, please stop. This is not how you're supposed to act. Please cut all that trash out. They, deleted that from his account shortly. I saw the video, and then they deleted it. It doesn't make sense. But why are they canceling all these people? Why did they cancel Mike Lindell's accounts? Nobody's doing anything violent on this stuff. You literally have that one if we're canceling them, we need to be canceling the lists and stacks on stacks of liberals and Hollywood folks and everyone else who have been basically encouraging rioting all through the whole last year. And look, there's rioting still going on in DC with people being threatened to be killed. Of course, we don't hear much about that. Nobody's sitting there. AOC isn't having to pretend to run from her office blocks away from where the actual action is because, they don't. It's no big deal. Oh, but they attacked the Capitol building. Yeah, that's where they were at. All right. And it was the weirdest attack I've ever seen. People walking around smoking and joking with cops, and some of it. I know not all of it, but in some of it. So this is Colonel Phil Waldron. This guy seems pretty legit. They're risking reputations. I mean, you're like, well, yeah, but what's a reputation? Does anyone really care about him after this is all over? I don't know. I can't live for them. I'm a nobody. I've got a couple of people following me on TikTok and on Twitch and YouTube and whatever, but I'm a nobody, but I wouldn't want my reputation dragged through the sand because I have to think about working and supporting my family. I can only imagine these people understand the risks they're taking. You hear this a couple times. You hear about fraud at a local level, fraud at the machine levels, and then basically national fraud type stuff in our government. And I'll go ahead and tell you that I'm pretty convinced about the fraud at the local level. I believe that. I have heard a lot of the accounts from people. There was some real hinky stuff going on, and some, there were things of Republicans. The debunking of the Atlanta Republican monitors getting kicked out. So that's another thing in here. And again, I know I'm kind of scatterbraining on this. This one right here. This is another fact check that's just trash check. All right, fact check. GOP observers did not swear in affidavits they were told to leave Fulton County, Georgia vote counts on election night. Now, maybe they didn't swear those exact words. That's another thing, too. these fact checkers never go to the spirit of what's being said. They always go to the letter. And it's really funny because it sounds like somebody being a dick online, where they're like, well, they said they were told to leave, but they weren't technically told to leave. So what happens in this fact check with Georgia being told to leave, and it's said through here several times, and there's really not a lot of contention about it. It says that there were people, it was getting, I guess, late in the morning or night or something like that. I think this is the right one. I might have the wrong one up here. Yeah, at 10:30, a woman who they thought was the supervisor of this one lady, they were told, someone yelled, everyone stop work and return the next day at 8:30. And they said I think they say there's a couple people mulling around that work there, whatever, the supervisor, but almost all the staff left. Work stopped at 10:30. Those 4 employees remained. They said they basically left, and then those people began firing ballots through. And that's the long of the short. Again, I don't want to sit here and read this entire thing. These are easy to find. I'm sitting there reading this, and I'm like, come on. If I'm at your house and you go, well, everybody, it's time for bed. For us to shut her down, shut the TV down, and go to bed. And I'm not sleeping over, and I have a home to go to myself down the road, I'm going to, even though you might be sitting on the couch when you say that, and I'm like, well, you're the boss around here, I'm going to go ahead and that's the message of leaving. Yeah? Right? Or do I have to sit there and go, and then you look at me and say, get the F out of my house? Of course you don't have to do that. I should be rolling out the door. And so that's what these people did. They rolled out the door because they're like, oh, work stopping 10:30, time to clock it out and head on to the house, be back at 8:30. And they left. But they're going, oh, nobody told them they had to leave. And nobody stopped them from trying to get back in. Yeah, because they left. They went home because you guys said work stopping at 10:30. Why did you continue going on? Or if you planned on continuing, why weren't you telling it? But see, they're saying fact check. That didn't happen. No, that's not how that worked. That did happen. It's just not in those exact words, maybe. All right. So again, splitting hairs is what that's called. And again, you're going to be like, well, the letter of the law. Okay, fine. But every time you misinterpret one little thing in your life, I hope somebody's slapping the piss out of you and taking advantage of you. And when you get upset about it and think I was done dirty, then you remember back to how you judged on this. All right. Hopefully everyone has enough common sense to go, that seems like somebody trying to get rid of people. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me, is like, yep, time to go. They gone? Yep. All right, let's go. Now, I don't know. Why would somebody go, you know what? I got a boost of energy. Let's keep on funneling 600,000 ballots or whatever it was through the system. Let's just keep going. Should we call them back? Nah. What, are they going to question anything? I mean, it's not like Trump's been saying for the past year and a half or whatever that they're going to try and rig the election. No one would ever accuse us in the most liberal county in Georgia of doing that. Come on. Think. That's what I've been trying to tell you guys from day one. Think for yourself. Listen to all the sides and figure it out. Base it off of like what makes sense. All right, so they talk a good bit about this. I know I'm not doing a good job breaking this down. I'm giving you a lot of opinions and stuff, but I'm trying. Basically, they talk about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they own the private equity firm of Dominion. Now, I do want to point out here real quick that I don't know. I'm not really sure how to check into that. I mean, if I do searches, it obviously is giving me all sorts of false info stories. So I haven't really figured out how to get around that, because it's not like you can just pull that out of like thin air. Maybe some of you know better, but see, I don't want some dark web reference that I have to go and find an anonymous, on a forum, because that's no better than me just going. CCP owns that company, and then holding it up to the screen and you guys going, oh, okay, there it's written down. It must be true. All right. So I'm not really sure how to confirm it or not. I don't really care, to be honest, because a fraud's a fraud's a fraud, and I don't care if it's China doing it or whatever. We need to fix the first problem first. I'll be honest with you. By the end of this video, I could dismiss almost the whole electronic aspect of this from the machine levels and the IPs. I'm not dismissing it all, but I could actually do with that being dismissed because we still have all that local level stuff. That's way more than enough to flip this thing back. And those are the people that are going to be working the polls next time. And we can unplug the machines next time from the internet, but we can't, we've got to have poll workers. But basically, that's part of his claim. One of the big things, though, this actually made a lot of sense to me. The testing company for these machines is in Shenzhen, China. I probably say that incorrectly. And he says they're the only ones with access to the code. Now, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So I used a breathalyzer in part of my job. I taught how to use a breathalyzer. I also used it a bunch for my cases. That's one of the big key points for the state that I'm in to have the breathalyzer accepted is the defense has to be able to have access to the code. All right. Because they need to be able to see, or at least have somebody on their side analyze the code to make sure there's nothing in there that's written to disadvantage the defendants. All right. So the code has to kind of be open and broad so that they can access it and determine that it's all legit. And so that's actually, when he said that, actually is a huge problem, that the only people with access to the code are in China, if that's indeed true. And again, these guys are not me, all right? I mean, Mike Lindell, he might as well be me. I never smoked crack or any drugs or anything like that. But I mean, he's just another guy that is, he's trying to use his resources to spread what he believes is the truth. All right, this guy on the right, though, he's not just some other guy. It's pretty impressive. His career is pretty impressive. And again, a lot of times the big argument that libs will make is, well, you can't speak on race issues because you're not a different race than what you are. Or you're not a race that's in the minority or whatever. Okay, so then we get somebody who can, based on those rules, which are shit rules, by the way. Because truth is the truth no matter what. You don't have to be a person to have the truth. Now, granted, I understand I wouldn't go into the whole electronic countermeasures and all this other stuff because I have no knowledge of that, like personally, that I've become an expert in. So I get maybe not being able to explain like living as a person of a different race. But as far as some of the issues, they're observable from any party. And so this guy right here, he is an expert in the types of things that deal with this sort of subversion, this forensic audits of electronic results and things like that. Which, by the way, Maricopa County, which is basically 3/4 of the population of all of Arizona, they are doing a forensic audit. That's big news, folks. But anyways, he says he has 100% proof of using IP mapping, that there were servers all over the place. Now, I don't believe that our special forces went and seized servers in Frankfurt, Germany, but I don't have a problem believing that servers could be in other countries. And he says there's servers in Frankfurt. And he even actually mentioned some of the companies by name. So again, a lot of folks were very contentious. Somebody in my channel mentioned that, it's a big problem that OAN had a big disclaimer. Even they don't believe it. It's not intended to be taken as fact. They did that because I think it was Newsmax, wasn't it? They got sued or was getting sued by Dominion because they're saying, hey, you're preaching this stuff as though it's been proven fact. And that's technically libel the way you're saying it. And so they had to kind of retract a little bit and say, we don't actually have the proof. We haven't proven this. And so that's why OAN did that, because because these guys, they mention stuff by name. Again, they're risking a lot by making this video. These isn't a couple dudes in there. They don't have the veil of anonymity of internet to hide behind. These guys have reputations. They're known people. They get hired to do, well, at least the guy on the right, the colonel, they get hired to do stuff. All right. Mr. Lindell has a business to run, or at least he's got a business. I think he passed CEO or something over to his son. But I mean, they've got reputations, and they're staking a lot, and they're staking potentially their finances and their well-being on the fact that they're mentioning companies by name. And as part of, they're not saying that they're the ones necessarily that did it, but they mention Dominion and everyone else by name. One other big thing that, if you watch this video, that comes from this conversation here, is that, again, when Attorney Barr gets up there and says no evidence or nothing has been uncovered, it's because the DOJ quit investigating this stuff. There was a point where they're talking about in here, and I think in the next one, where there's this rolling piles of information, and it's getting worse and worse of all the things they're finding, and then all of a sudden someone's saying, stop, leave it be. Did that happen? I wasn't there. I don't know 100% for sure, but there's got to be a record somewhere, I would imagine, or at least, again, this guy said, hey, the DOJ just stopped, and didn't it seem kind of weird that you never hear anything except for the detractors and the people that are the naysayers? They're the ones getting hard investigated. Does that not sound like the last 4 years of our country, with Comey and all these guys running around claiming just nonsense? But they're not, and then we have all this hard stuff that we're seeing about Hillary Clinton and things. You're just like, right there, just dig into that, and nobody's doing a thing. I mean, it makes sense again to me. Like I said, I can't prove 100% the DOJ did that, but it makes sense. All right, this stuff doesn't smell like garbage. That's the thing that's bothering me the most. This stuff isn't smelling in the least bit. It actually fits in with the way that things have been going for the past, God only knows, 30, 40 years. All right, so this is not like something insanely radical and off the wall. This is like step 12 of a 15-step process or something. It just seems like this was the natural way that our country was going. His next person that comes in here, if I can even find that's this dude, Russell Ramsey, I think his name is. And so again, this guy goes, and he's part of the Allied Security Group, ASOG, I think is what it stands for. And again, they're doing this forensic investigation stuff. And so they talk about Texas, and he goes into how Texas, they actually been tracking activity in Texas, I think he said for as far back as 2018. He says FBI basically was inactive after they were given info. CISA, you see CISA, C-I-S-A, the cyber information, whatever, cyber intelligence or whatever, security administration. I think that's what it stands for. I don't have it right in front of me. But the people that have been quoted as debunking a million times over, this was very secure. The head of CISA says it's very secure election. All right. Basically, Homeland Security was looking into all this stuff. Homeland Security was, flipping out about all this. And when they asked CISA to take a look, CISA said, we don't want anything to do with it. They refused it. Again, the lack of activity is not indicative of the validity of the claims. It's not. Horrifying. This dude right here, he made my head fall off, because he must have said horrifying about 28 times, but I guess he was really horrified by what they're finding. They're finding no security overseas storage of stuff. Again, said the Department of Homeland Security was told not to pursue this stuff. Now, this guy talks a good bit about Antrim County up in Michigan. He also talks about some of the cases that are still open. And this is the guy that talks about having two mystery counties that they aren't revealing. But the biggest thing that stuck out to me about this was they said the adjudication ballots in Antrim were 80, I think it was 82% or 87. I can't read my own handwriting. 82% or 87%, the adjudication ballots. If you're not familiar with what those are, if I run a ballot through and for whatever reason that I need to, I need to like determine if that was how that person essentially meant to vote. For example, maybe they voted for all like liberals and also there's one Republican showing up or something like that. This was actually a contention years and years ago back in Minnesota, I think it was, when Al Franken was elected to Senate. They said there was claims back then of votes being switched to Al Franken because they said, "Oh, these people wouldn't have intended to vote for him, or they wouldn't have intended to vote for the other guy. They meant to vote for him." I'm telling you, if that's how it happens. No, I don't remember the numbers involved in Al Franken, but he said 82%. And Mike Lindell asked the question that I was asking, how many percentage, what's the percentage that normally would be put on adjudication? And so again, what's happening is running the ballot in, and it's supposed to be put in this box of has been run, or it can be put in the adjudication ballot box. They're putting 82% of the ballots into that adjudication box. And what they do is they pull them out later and determine if the votes were meant to be made that way. And again, he says, what are the adjudication rates on that? And he says, less than 1%. And in Antrim County, they were 82%. Now, I think that's the one that I saw that was supposedly debunked. I'm not sure, because some of these I couldn't quite match them up one-to-one with what they were talking about. That might have been the one that they said that was a mistake and a clerical error, that she was just throwing them in the wrong box by accident, and they fixed like 6,000 votes that went towards Trump. I don't think that was all the ones in contention. So they actually used that part of it as debunking his other claims from Antrim and somewhere else, I think in Michigan. And that's not the whole story, though. So again, they're saying, oh, they fixed the error that did happen. So the rest of it's just they made those numbers up. And it's like, no, that's not how you debunk. All right, unless you actually have proof that's what he did. What's even worse is they said Fulton County. Now, again, Fulton County is one of the suburb counties, not suburb counties, but it's one of the counties that Atlanta is in. And they have a 93.6% adjudication rate. That means of the ballots, whatever the original count of the ballots they're talking about going in, 93% of them, if this is true, almost 94% of them were put in a thing and adjudicated, meaning that somebody else got to make that decision on whether that vote was supposed to be, who it was supposed to be for. That right there, I would like to see that source on that. But that alone, if that ends up being validated and true, that's massive, folks. That somebody that's sitting there running a ballot through can make the decision for you. He talks about 57,000 votes were changed in Dallas alone. So they switched talking to Texas. Why didn't Texas go for Trump or Biden? Why didn't Texas get over onto Biden? How did Trump still win Texas? And again, this is where I was saying earlier, in 2018, they said that they actually had started looking into this and they were raising alarms all the way through. Pete Sessions, when he lost, all right, that was where they really started picking up the pace on that and trying to figure out what happened. He said Texas was basically the people trying to hoodoo Texas were running scared. They already were flagged. They were already watching that very closely in Texas, and so they didn't pull the little hoodoo. But if you remember this year, Texas was really weirdly close. It was like bizarre kind of. Now, I do know that a lot of libs have moved into Austin. They've moved out of California. They're moving over to Texas. So, I mean, I can understand that some of these states are going to start tilting centric, maybe. But yeah, Texas is like one of those bastions of conservatism, basically. That for them to go blue would be a real crazy thing. Basically, the debunks and investigation are thin or non-existent. Again, that's as these guys were talking, I was researching the guy just to kind of see what their pedigree was, but I was also looking up these claims, some of them. And there's like, again, the debunks are not debunks like the debunks you get from me. The debunks were, they were like, someone said nuh-uh, and they haven't proven it to us, so debunked, false. Now, I'd call that middle of the road then at the very worst. I'd call that cannot confirm or deny. I'm not going to sit here and debunk and call something false just because, again, because you didn't give me 100% proof. Now, some of you have claimed stuff after I've debunked something. You say, well, this was a problem. You didn't consider this. And I say, show me or tell me. Give me the proof. But if you just come back and say, nuh-uh, I'm like, yeah, get out of my channel. I don't need that. These guys aren't just going, yes, huh? They're showing, and they've got tons of stuff. They're sitting on piles of data, and then most of the debunk is nuh-uh, and you haven't shown us every single thing to make it 100% certain, and it hasn't been seen in court. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they won't hear it. It's funny because in Trump's speech that he was over at, when he was speaking on January 6th, he says, people keep calling these new Supreme Court people my puppets. He says, I haven't talked to them basically since they got sworn in. He says that they don't have anything to do with me. They don't owe me anything. In fact, one of them, I don't know which one it was. He was one of them. People were telling me I shouldn't even have him. He's not that good. And I said, no. He hasn't done anything wrong. We're gonna keep him. And he says they don't have any allegiance to me. And so, like I said, you never know. They might be. I mean, John Roberts is not a conservative. That guy has flipped so many times into the negative that I don't count him as one of the strong ones on there. Clarence Thomas, those types of guys are strongly constitutional conservatives. I don't know about the rest of them. All right, so basically that was this guy in a nutshell. So again, I think the evidence they're presenting and the stuff they're talking about, again, very convincing about the local problem and the corruption or compromised government. I'm still not at a point yet where in this video that I'm like all in on the electronic side. But it does get deeper. So again, this is my take on everything. And just kind of my opinions on it. And I know a lot of you might criticize me because you're like, well, you say you don't use opinions or whatever. You're not going to get 100% satisfaction either way. You're not going to find a debunk that's going to get rid of this video. You're not going to find a confirmation that's going to prove it 100%. And I guess that's where I kind of come in on this, and that's what I was kind of pushing with my little tutorial on debunking or fact checking is you've got to weigh it in light of everything else. And I think I have a kicker here that's going to help you kind of understand why my opinion is so strong the way it is and why I think that pretty much the majority of this video is going to be true. I'll go ahead and tell you that right now if that's the point you're waiting on. At least I got you for a little bit. So you have Dr. Shiva here. He is an expert, he says, in pattern analysis. And I'll go ahead and tell you that I have a lot of, like, that instantly won my heart over. Pattern analysis, you see stuff and you're like, how is this? This is too good to be true. And I don't know if this is the guy or who it was that did that analysis and said that basically Trump or Biden's chances of winning with all the other things that were going the way they were was like 1 in some ridiculous number, like 1 in 2 billion chance. And it was, you're like, well, that's a chance. The reason they're giving that number at all is they're trying to let you know how preposterous it is that he won. All right, so that's the whole deal. This guy here, though, he ran for, I think it was Senate up in wherever that idiot Elizabeth Warren's from, Massachusetts or something. And he ran up there as in the primary for Senate seat. And he spent lots of money advertising, bumper stickers, all that. Saw his bumper sticker signs everywhere. The other guy was a no-name, nobody knew him, but he was the establishment candidate. And this guy, Dr. Shiva, was predicted to win like 90% of the votes or some craziness. I don't remember, but basically he lost like 60-40. And he said one of the things was is that I didn't catch exactly how he did, and I didn't go back to like write it all down exactly, but basically he said there was a whole bunch of counties, they were all 60-40 against him. And I actually went and looked up that election. They weren't exactly 60-40, and there were several counties that went his way 60-40, but it was really bizarre. Like the numbers in almost every single county or precinct. I don't even know if they were counted by county, because that seemed like a lot of counties for Massachusetts, and some of them only had like 40 people in them. So it might have been precincts, but all of them were like almost in the range of 60-40. Now when I say 60-40, it could have been 57-43 or whatever, but it wasn't exactly 60-40s. But it was like the same ratio or very close to it in almost every county. He does talk about this weighted race system and actually refers to an exact page number in one of the guidebooks of one of the Diebold voting machine. He says it's page 2-126, and it talks about a weighted race system where basically if both of you get 4,000 votes, he might get a multiplier, the opponent might get a multiplier of like 1.2, and he might get a multiplier of 0.8, and so it basically like takes votes from one and adds them to the other, or essentially that's what it looks like, but it's basically multiplying one by 1.2 and the other one by 0.8, and you're going to have a gap suddenly. So he talks about that. I don't know if he's claiming that happened anywhere in particular, but yeah, he's interesting. I would have liked to have heard him more and without as many interruptions from Mike. Yeah, he's only in here for a little bit, and I really don't understand. I don't know that he really added anything to this. The next guy is Patrick Colbeck, a former Michigan senator, and he was just talking about the machines definitely being connected to the internet. That's right. I think he was a former senator, and he was a poll observer, and he said these machines were definitely connected to the internet. That was his big thing. This was the girl, Melissa Carone. Here's the big thing. Her claims, this was actually very important, I think, to this video, is she talks about what she saw. Her claims were not truly debunked. All right, basically she's talking about the fact, or her claim is that she's in there and she's observing these people like running ballots, and the machines are jamming, and so they're pulling them out instead of discarding the ballot or something. They're like rerunning ballots, and so stacks of 50 are coming out with 90 votes or whatever. And so on and so forth like that. And this is the one that I was telling you that the judge basically says, that's too unbelievable to me. Your claim is too unbelievable. And, Michigan, I think it was, like I said, Michigan, they said they did it right. So I'm not even going to hear it. Again, that's not a debunk. That's not even being heard in court. That's just somebody going, nah, I don't want to hear this. And then somebody else going, well, that's a debunk then, so it's debunked. That's not how that works. That's not how it works, people. It's not debunked. I'm not saying it's confirmed. Again, when I say something hasn't been debunked, I don't mean the 100% alternative is true. And I get a lot of that too. People think I'm a hack for Biden because I'm debunking shit that Trump supporters say. No, I'm a huge Trump supporter. I'm just debunking trash. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that I have some ulterior motive, except actually my motives are pure on that. I want the truth to come out, so that when stuff like this comes up, and it does require an element of faith, or it does require an element of using common sense, that we don't sound like a bunch of lunatics. All right, this is the whole purpose behind this, is when actual stuff comes out that has teeth. We don't want people to just be like, I've seen their shit. Yeah, right. It's not 50 degrees. He's not wearing a jacket, and it's supposed to be a cold day. Nobody gives a shit. It doesn't mean anything anyways. Even if they took a picture from the spring of those two walking around, it doesn't mean anything. You said they staged a photo. It wouldn't mean anything, because the trash they're signing is very real. The Congress that's fixing to put this HR whatever, the firearms bill up that's going to be massively against our Constitution. That is very real stuff. It's very scary. You don't need to be worried about is Biden in the real Oval Office or not. He is. But you don't need to sweat that because it doesn't matter. Once they sign those bills, if that's what happens, you're going to be screwed just like the rest of us. And all of that thinking about other stuff is going to be for naught. You need to be focused on the real problems. Or this right here, this might actually help. I don't know. But the next guy is Matt DePerno or whatever. Now this guy's on here for a good little bit. He's a Michigan attorney, and basically he's one that talked about missing thumb drives. He talked about some of the stuff being unlocked and not secures. He talks about the voting spikes and how did that many votes come in at that particular time. But this dude right here, if you don't listen to anything that anyone else says, you need to listen to this guy because he's talking about that attorney general that if you were party to this whole Trump claim and you were one of the attorneys on it, you should be disbarred in Michigan. Really? That's how we do things with people that we don't agree with. Again, they're acting like these are people who are trying to undermine the country like they were part of some shadowy government, and it's not. These are people who are like, there's real problems here. We've got real claims. We've got eyewitnesses. We have things that are just very astronomically off, and we need to get these heard. We need someone to evaluate these. We need scrutiny. Oh, you're party to Donald Trump's delusion. That's so crazy. But yeah, she not only said that, I didn't understand this next part exactly, but basically she did allude to these people getting criminally charged, attorneys getting criminally charged for some of this stuff. It's bizarre, but I mean, this is, and I will say this is one of the, I think Mike is the one that said this, and it was one of the most coherent type statements you could pull from this. He says basically they're putting the fear of government above the rights of the client. They're saying, because again, you gotta think, all these people in Michigan that believe and voted for Trump and they think that they got hoodooed, they're the client. It's their right to know that their government election system worked. And they're saying, we're going to disbar you and maybe criminally charge you. That's a totalitarian type of government. That is insane. That is not the United States, folks. That's not how we roll. So he's pretty good. He's a good one for the listen. Then we have Mary Fanning coming in. Well, so I don't want to go through all this stuff because there's a lot of things in here that get real technical. But this actually talks a good bit about the vote switching and some of the things as far as like the forensics reports. I mean, this again hasn't even been heard really in a courtroom, but they talk about all the forensic stuff. It's again, it's not somebody who's just like making this stuff up. They're talking about ballot reversals. Here's where also they were talking about the rejection rate, basically the ballots being rejected because they supposedly weren't for the right person, so they were reversed. I mean, that's, again, I alluded to a lot of this stuff, so it's pretty scary. So yeah, he goes on for a good bit with him. Now, this part right here is where you kind of have to go. This is the part here that if they had cut off after that last guy, I probably would have been fine. Like, I would have been great with the whole video at this point. I'm not against this part. Don't get me wrong. I'm not debunking or saying this part's not true, but this is the part that is, it's not, if you're going to go on faith, it's the one you're going to have to go on faith the most of, because there's literally nowhere do we know where this came from. Now, Mary Fanning, it says national intelligence researcher and author. You can't really find a lot about her pedigree online. She was not like a specialist in the military or anything like that, like our colonel was earlier. She's a pretty successful person, but someone asked me what's her credentials, and I don't really know what her credentials are to speak on this. Now, she does allude to a cyber expert, but she never mentions the name of who this cyber expert is that compiled and found this stuff. So this, to me, if we're going to debunk, or if I'm going to tell you and recommend to you, don't hang your hat on it, this would be the one. But again, this right here as much as like this is probably, if this is true, I mean, it's a horrible thing and it's actually scarier than the first part, because we can prosecute the people in our country that are doing bad things. We have some names and things like that. This one right here, this is real like craziness. I say craziness. It's like, just to imagine this and see this going on, if it is real, it's absolutely wild. And so again, I'm not suggesting it's not. I just, right here, I'm kind of on middle of the road. So basically what her claims are is, and now I will say this. I don't know how you're going to compile basically from, like, I think 2 days before the election, November 1st through November 5th, I'm guessing based on these dates here. She basically is saying we have all this evidence, these records of these machines or these IP addresses from other countries, and it tells who the source owners are, and here's the ID of the computer, the actual computer, and then the target IP, which is the actual IP of the machine that it's going to, or the area it's going to. So they highlight this one here, the Shenzhen, but there's a ton of other stuff, and this is what's really bizarre. You have Beijing, you have Santa Rosa, California, you have Beijing, you have, I don't know if that's Colorado, I didn't look that one up. I don't know if that's Turkey. There were several in Russia, one in the Ukraine in here, some from Japan, Singapore. And here's the thing. I actually looked up some of these IPs, and they were coming back to Beijing, to Shenzhen, and it was given coordinates. Now, I don't know what the coordinates. I don't think it's supposed to be like from the house location where they came. I think it's just basically like the city coordinates. So it was mostly center city stuff. I think. I don't know if that's how that works or not, or if it's like the tower or the node that comes off of. But this stuff that I was checking was coming from different countries. And these I don't really know what to do with. The ID source, the IP targets, again, I was looking those up, and I looked up the one from Georgia here, and that was showing up. Some of these were showing up as government IPs. So you see actually what the method of intrusion was, whether they used credentials, whether they were able to get through the firewall, whether both, or whatever. And then you actually see if it's successful, and you see the changes in the voting. And it says Trump down on all of these, and it has like certain numbers. And again, they're very specific numbers. And you're like, well, you could random number generate. Okay, but how do you get all those? Let's just say they're on here once, 3,000 entries, and you're going to have legit IP addresses that can be traced to each one of these. And I don't know if you can do anything with the ID source, that MAC code there, I think is what that's called, or MAC address, but I don't know. Somebody in my comments said this could be a huge key because you could track all this stuff down. My thing is where this list come from, and this is the biggest problem for me. Who's the cyber expert, and where did this come from? And you can't just say cyber expert and be done with it. Now there is an interesting point here where they run this animation right here. And basically, this is an animation of all of that data being presented as these arcing things from the county that it was going to, like where the packet of data was going to and where it originated based on all those IPs. Because, again, you type in the IP, you get a actual GPS code. And I went and put the GPS codes, like I said, into Google Earth. And, I mean, I was getting those cities or those areas. And so that's what this is basically representing, is also the times. And I mean, I know how this animation was built. All right. So I'm not concerned about the animation being faulty or anything based on the data. The animation's probably good with the data. What I'm concerned is again, where the hell did this come from? Now, there is this little file up here. It says election11.csv. What you find when you Google that is, or actually I DuckDuckGo'd it, I think, or something, you'll find like people talking, show us election11.csv or shut up. And I'm kind of on that same page. All right. So I don't know though. Like I said, I don't want to discredit it because I don't know enough about it. But I just think This would be a lot more powerful, I believe, if you could provide some sources to it. The voting stuff, I kind of know where some of those sources or where that stuff came from. I mean, that stuff's been getting investigated now, and that those stories have been popping up for the last 3 months. This right here, I don't know what that means. If it doesn't, if it's not exactly what they say, I don't know how else to interpret that. And again, maybe someone's a networking expert. But again, I strongly say this: even if this right here, if you cut off this whole entire talk about the internet stuff, you still have the other problems to deal with. So I don't want anyone out there thinking, even if I'm not 100% convinced yet, but I'm not completely debunked on it either. I'm like 50-50 right now on this. I have no way of knowing if this is right or wrong. All right, but that does not discredit the other hour and 43 minutes, basically, or whatever of this. Now he pulls, he shows us animation and it's real. He pulls up General McHenry. I'll be honest with you. I bless this man for his service, everything. I'm sure he's a wonderful man. He adds nothing to this, and at least for me. In fact, whenever I hear his name and people start talking about General McHenry, I think McHenry is the one that was talking about the military was going to roll up and they were getting ready to do the Days of Darkness. I don't remember. Like I said, all this Q stuff, it just kind of, rumbles around in my mind as I've heard it because I don't really put any faith into it. It's kind of like wind passing through. So I have heard his name associated with a lot of these. Here's what's going to happen, and we're fixing to drop the hammer, and this, that, and the other thing. Kind of like Lynn Wood, kind of like Sydney, whatever her name is, Sydney Powell. And I'm just like, all talk, no, all smoke, no fire, right? And again, I don't mean to be disrespectful to those people and what they done, but I'm like, I mean, he doesn't say anything that's outlandish. He's not making any real big claims in here. He's basically just saying, yeah, this was a fraud. So I mean, he's not, but he could have not been in here, and they would have added literally nothing more to this credentially, and it takes nothing really away either, other than the fact that he's the only one so far I've seen that has any even slight, and I might be wrong about the Q connection because again, I don't get into that stuff, but he's kind of the little thread to me. Just that I'm like, I would have probably stayed away from anyone that had anything to do with like actual conspiracy theories that have been debunked. But maybe I'm wrong about him. But like I said, he's pointless in here. They could have cut that whole thing out. Bless his heart though. This Terry Turchi guy or Turchi, he's basically he doesn't add a whole bunch to it either. So the big thing is that I will say this: Mike does have a very good message at the end, near the end here, and again, it's one of the more to the point messages where he's not kind of here and there and everywhere, and he basically says, "This is not Democrat and Republican." Yeah, granted, if this were to flip the election, but then again, we know that probably record numbers of Democrats voted for Trump, so record numbers of minorities voted for Trump this election. We know that as a fact. The big deal, though, here is he says, this is the great uniter of our country. And honestly, at the end of the day, and this is kind of where I'm going with this, I think that it's a good idea to watch this with an open mind, listen, observe, do what you've got to do to feel better about this or to disprove this in your mind. Please don't let preconceived notions guide you to where you're just like, oh, it's Mike Lindell and he got kicked off Twitter and he's been called a conspiracy theorist, so therefore it's a conspiracy theory. Or, oh, lead stories as a quote unquote debunk of all of this. Which I did see an article that says all of this has been debunked, and I just told you, and you can go searching, prove me wrong on that, or help me out. I guess it's not to prove me wrong. That's my big thing. I'm not out here to like make people look bad. I want to help. I want to help all sides. All right, and you're like, well, you keep trying to like guide us away from Biden towards Trump. Yeah, I'm trying to help you get out of I mean, why would anyone want that clown? Anyways, the problem though is that, yeah, you're gonna have to make the decision for yourself on that one, and that's where I come down on this. Is that I think this is probably, in my heart of hearts, like if I just had to give you my heart of hearts, this is 75% confirmed true and 25% unknown, and 0% disproven. People signing their names and their livelihoods potentially away, people at risk criminally who are still pursuing this. That's a lot more weight. And again, that's why in my heart of hearts, I think it's a way higher percentage, because that's a lot more weight. That's a lot more risk than someone going, I'm not going to let you see what's on this pad, but my answer is nuh-uh. And that's what I'm saying. You can't just say nuh-uh, you know. And honestly, I don't think the defendant in this case gets to remain silent. I mean, this is a big deal, and it there's no trust. There's not going to be any unity. There's not going to be anything that's going to be beneficial to our country until there's some sort of like solid end to this. And you can't make liberals and even the hardest of left people, the solid end is not silencing us and sending us to re-education camps. All right, trying to like completely, I mean, trying to de-educate us as it's been or whatever. That's what Pol Pot did. And if you don't know who Pol Pot is, go and look up the Khmer Rouge. I think I'm saying that correctly, in Cambodia. That's what re-education and getting rid of the people who were the smart ones in society on the opposition and the opposition candidates. Something to the tune of, basically a genocide. That's why people don't really cotton too nicely to that type of talk, is because when you say re-education camps, there's nowhere on this planet that's ever been a good thing. So in our history, I don't think they're going to do anything about this. I think they're going to try and brush it off, like, throw some, debunk bullshit stories up there, and then they're going to go, that's the end of it, and we're going to be right where we were. This article right here, The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election. All right. And this is basically, I don't know who this person is, Molly Ball. Time National previously covered U.S. politics for The Atlantic and Politico. Which are, and the reason I laugh is they're both super lib magazines. She's the author of Pelosi, a best-selling biography of the first woman Speaker of the House. Do you think that book calls Pelosi a raging idiot? Probably not. So would you believe anything this person says? Not me. All right. So you can already tell that the fact it's in Time magazine, which is one of the number one just heaps of waste paper magazines on the planet. Number two, this woman right here probably wasn't forced at gunpoint. She wrote Pelosi's biography, which, I mean, I guarantee you that thing is just littered with garbage and lies. And so this right here, as you can imagine, is going to be written with a very strong slant in the liberal perspective. So, and it's horrible. But this is basically, this article here, I don't recommend you reading it. I go read it so you can believe me or not, whatever you want to do. I honestly, liberals are the one that need to read this, because when I start talking about this, and they're like, nah, it's all debunked. It's all bullshit. Nah, it's not happening. Go read this. They don't own up to forgeries and stuff like that and fraud, but it's pretty darn close. The shadowy cabal, I'm not even going to go down and find the quote, the shadowy cabal of corporations, and basically the dude that ran the whole thing is the head of the AFL-CIO. His background is super progressive socialist nonsense. So I mean, they say that basically the reason that they did all of this stuff, and they don't say we defraud the government, but they talk about some of the things they did that is pretty stinking I mean, it's all but a confession. And they say they did it to save the democracy because they knew there was going to be problems. And then they also even say in here, we knew Trump was going to claim that this was a rubbish election because he's already been talking about it being set up. It's ludicrous. So you can't, you've got to start by admitting there is massive bias against conservatism, Christianity, Trump, Republicans, whatever. Whatever you hate. If you hate it because you see it in the media, then you got to first go, maybe they're not always telling the truth. Maybe these fact checks aren't always facts. Here's one. Fact check. Lawsuit does not claim out-of-state ballots, out-of-state vehicles brought tens of thousands of unsealed ballots to Michigan, all for Dems. And then as you go down in here and actually read the allegations, and again, I'm not going into it super deep, but basically what they're saying is there was vehicles with out-of-state. I mean, it's like they're claiming all these things, and essentially the debunk is this is not an allegation that all of the ballots were for Biden. The witness only accounts for hearing about 30 of them, and he didn't know. And then the debunk is not examining the validity of the complaints. We're only making a conclusion about how the article reported on the lawsuit concerning the ballots purportedly delivered by out-of-state vehicles. Our findings are enough to say that this is partly false. So, number one, they don't do like the little meter of falseness here, but they're saying, okay, well, this to the letter is partly false, and that just means be more careful when you speak. But number two, they're using this as part of the fact check that debunks everything in that video. Well, no, they're saying it's partly false and it wasn't 100% accurate the way it was said. That doesn't mean that the whole thing's trash, And so, yeah, again, you got to be super careful. And so, like I said, there's a bunch of different things that, they're pushing out there. And this is one of those things that they're pushing is that, Trump was a boob and everyone that supports him is in a cult. I don't know. It gets ludicrous that the way they're going about this. So again, at the end of the day, the video pretty convincing. I say even if it's 50% true, let alone I think it's about 75% true, and I'm saying confirmable truth that wouldn't take too much to really like put it on the record as confirmable. It could be 100% true. I don't know. But I don't think it's all made up. And I think the smoking gun in this is the fact that basically Time magazine is admitting to the fact that they were trying to work behind the scenes. Not Time magazine, but there were people working behind the scenes to basically make sure Trump didn't win. And so this isn't beyond the pale. This is not beyond the realm of possibility with this. I would be very careful to dismiss this outright, but please also be careful. I've already seen comments on my preview video that people were like, does Jesus have to come down? Because I'm like, this is not 100%. This is not how you prove a case in court. If these were all to go to court, I would have to tell you that if they didn't bring more than what they showed in here, they should lose. They need to have proof of this. They need to have, it doesn't have to be 100% proof like Mike Lindell's saying, but they've got to be able to prove this beyond just conjecture. It's got to go more than 50-50. You can't just say a number, as someone can say nuh-uh. But, they need, I hope they've got it all, too. What will happen from it, I have no idea. But I am putting this on, I am saying that this is worth the watch. And I do think that it should convince you that there is definitely something is up. Is definitely some things very wrong going on. I can't debunk it. If I wanted to, I couldn't confirm it or validate it 100% if I wanted to. But in my heart of hearts, yeah, I think this is mostly good to go. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. There's a lot of stuff still going on in the courts. And I don't know what can be done at this point. I don't. If they say, yeah, we agree with you, it's 100%. I don't know what you can do. I honestly don't. Uh, so I guess all we can do is pray and just leave it in God's hands. All right. So, anyways, this is gonna be on this. I do appreciate you guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to leave comments and everything in TikTok as well as whatnot. But I would appreciate your subs on YouTube. I would like to hit 1,000 subscribers at least, and move forward with this because I am trying to really develop my online content. And so that'd be a big stepping stone. I think the TikTok community is pretty sweet. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of all this. Tell me what you think, though, please. You don't even have to follow or subscribe. Just tell me what you think, and I look forward to it. All right, take care. Talk to y'all later.